Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. You will marry him, Sophia. And I won't take no for an answer." Sophia Bennett nearly dropped the coffee cup she was holding. Her stepmother, Victoria, stood in the kitchen with her arms crossed, her face red with anger, clutching a crumpled envelope. "Emily, who?" Sophia's voice came out higher than she intended. "James Harlan, the bastard son of the Harlan family." Victoria threw the envelope on the table. "He just got out of prison. He's a complete loser. But his family is willing to pay for your grandmother's surgery in exchange for a marriage." Sophia felt the world spin. Her grandmother, June, had been hospitalized for a week, needing emergency heart surgery that cost over $80,000. They didn't have that money. "Victoria, you can't be serious. I don't even know this man." "I do." Victoria pulled out her phone and showed a blurry photo of a thin man with stubble and worn clothes. "James Harlan, 28 years old. Just served 3 years for, well, it doesn't matter why. The point is, the Harlan family has money and they want someone to marry him to clean up their image." Sophia looked at the photo, trying to process the information. The man looked ordinary, maybe even a little lost. "Why me?" "Because you're beautiful, educated, and you have no choice." Victoria leaned over the table. "Your grandmother has 48 hours, Sophia. Either you accept this proposal or..." Sophia's phone rang. It was the hospital. "Miss Bennett, you need to come urgently. Your grandmother's condition has deteriorated." Sophia hung up with trembling hands. She looked at Victoria, then at the blurry photo on the phone. "Where do I sign?" 2 hours later, Sophia sat in a cheap cafe downtown, waiting to meet her future husband. Her hands trembled as she stirred sugar into her coffee for the 5th time. The door opened with a bell's chime, and she looked up, expecting to see the man from the photo. Instead, someone completely different entered. Tall, about 6'1", with perfectly cut dark hair, a defined jawline, and wearing a suit that clearly cost more than Sophia's monthly salary. He looked around the cafe with an almost amused expression. Sophia looked back at the door. Where was James Harlan? The man in the suit walked directly to her table. "Sophia Bennett." His voice was deep, confident. "You guessed it, James Harlan." He extended his hand. "Pleasure to meet you." Sophia froze. This man was nothing like the photo Victoria had shown her. He was gorgeous, completely out of her league. You're not what I expected." James smiled, and the smile completely transformed his face. "I imagine not. May I sit?" Sophia nodded, still in shock. He sat gracefully, and she noticed his hands were well manicured without calluses. They didn't look like hands of someone who had just gotten out of prison. "Look, I know this situation is unusual." James leaned forward. "But I need you to know that I'll take care of you. It's not a real marriage, obviously, but during the time we're together, you won't need to worry about anything." "Why do you need to get married?" The question came out before she could censor herself. James hesitated for a moment. "Let's say my family has certain expectations and I need to meet them to have access to certain things. Inheritance, something like that." He pulled an envelope from his suit's inner pocket. "Here are the documents. If you sign, the money for your grandmother's surgery will be transferred today." Sophia looked at the envelope. Inside was a marriage contract, a check, and a ring. A ring that definitely wasn't cheap. "You already had everything prepared." "I always prepare for all possibilities." James watched as she flipped through the documents. "There are some specific clauses. We'll live together for 6 months. We need to appear together at social events." And he stopped. "And my family is intense. They'll want to meet you. They'll ask questions. They'll test whether our relationship is real." Sophia felt a chill in her stomach. "Test how?" "They'll observe how we interact. If we know details about each other, if we show natural affection." "You're saying we'll have to pretend to be in love?" James looked into her eyes for the first time since he'd sat down. "Basically, yes." Sophia thought about her grandmother lying in the ICU, waiting for a surgery that could save her. She thought about the desperate expression on her face when the doctors explained the risks of waiting. "Where do I sign?" "They live where?" Sophia stood in front of a mansion that looked like it had come straight out of a movie. 3 stories. Perfectly manicured gardens, and a fountain in the center of the circular driveway. James stood beside her, carrying her single suitcase. "It's temporary," he said, clearly uncomfortable, "until we find our own place." "James, This isn't a house. This is a resort. Before he could respond, the main door opened and an elegant woman of about 50 appeared. She wore a dress that cost more than Sophia's car, and her hair was pulled back in a perfect bun. James. She descended the steps with open arms. Finally, and this must be the famous Sophia, Aunt Lydia. James kissed the woman's cheek. Sophia. This is my Aunt Lydia. She's, let's say, the family matriarch. Lydia extended her hands and held Sophia's with a warm smile. Dear, what a pleasure to finally meet you. James has talked about you so much. Sophia shot a quick glance at James. When exactly had he talked about her? Harlan. Lydia, please. We're family now. Lydia guided them inside the house. Come. Everyone is eager to meet the woman who finally conquered our James's heart. The entrance hall was even more impressive inside. Marble floors, crystal chandelier, and a double staircase that curved elegantly to the second floor. Everyone. Sophia whispered to James. I should have mentioned that my family is numerous. As if summoned, several people began appearing from different directions. A tall, bald man, clearly the patriarch, walked with an ornate cane. A blonde woman with an accent Sophia couldn't identify came from the kitchen, drying her hands on an apron. Two younger men ran down the stairs arguing loudly about something. Harlan family. Lydia clapped to get attention. I'd like to officially introduce Sophia Bennett, James's fiancée. The patriarch approached first. Robert Harlan. He extended his hand. James's father. Sophia almost choked. Father? But James had said he was a bastard son. Very nice to meet you, Mr. Harlan. Robert, please. Welcome to the family. He turned to James. She's even more beautiful than you described. Again, Sophia looked at James, confused. When had he described her? The blonde woman approached. I'm Greta, the cook. But everyone here treats me like family. She hugged Sophia warmly. James told me you love Thai food. I prepared a special feast. I love Thai food. Sophia responded automatically, though she didn't remember mentioning that. The two younger men approached. Lucas, the first, introduced himself. James's cousin, family lawyer. Ethan, said the second, also cousin. I manage the family businesses. Businesses? Sophia asked. Investments? James answered quickly. Nothing very interesting. Lydia clapped again. Well, how about we show Sophia where you'll be staying? I prepared the third-floor suite. As they climbed the stairs, Sophia whispered to James, Suite? As in one bed? 2 beds, he whispered back. I already arranged it. The suite was bigger than Sophia's entire apartment. It had a living room, a master bedroom with a king-size bed, and a smaller room with a single bed. James always slept in the smaller room, Lydia explained. He has insomnia. Didn't want to bother you. Sophia looked at James, who was clearly uncomfortable. How considerate, she said. Well, I'll let you get settled. Dinner is at 7. Lydia stopped at the door. Oh, and Sophia, tomorrow I have a surprise for you. Surprise? We're going shopping for your wedding dress. Sophia felt her blood freeze. Wedding dress? For the vow renewal ceremony. Of course, we can't let you stay married only in civil court. The Harlan family has traditions. Lydia left, closing the door behind her. Sophia turned to James, who was running his hands through his hair. Vow renewal? I may have forgotten to mention some things. Some things? Sophia exploded. James, your family is rich. You clearly didn't get out of prison. Your father treats you like an heir, and now we're having a real wedding ceremony. James sat on the bed, looking defeated. It's complicated, then uncomplicated. I can't. Not yet. He looked at her. But I can tell you one thing. Nothing you're seeing is a lie. My family really likes you. How can they like me? They just met me. Because I talked about you when we met yesterday. James was silent for a long moment. James Harlan, you're driving me crazy. I know, and I'm sorry for that. He stood up. But I need you to trust me. At least for the next 6 months. Are you going to give me any explanation? I will when the time is right. Sophia threw herself into the living room armchair. This is insane. I know. James approached. But you saved your grandmother. The surgery went well. It did. She's recovering. Sophia looked at him. Thank you for that. Don't thank me yet. We still have a lot of work ahead. What kind of work? Well, for starters, you need to learn my favorite color, my preferred food, and how I like my coffee. Because tomorrow during shopping, my Aunt Lydia will ask exactly those questions. Sophia sighed. What's your favorite color? Blue. Blue like your eyes. She looked at him, surprised. You hadn't even noticed the color of my eyes. I had. It was the first thing I noticed when you walked into the cafe. For a moment, something flickered between them. Something that felt dangerously real. This one or this one? Lydia held up 2 wedding dresses that each probably cost more than Sophia's annual salary. They were standing in an exclusive bridal boutique in Manhattan, surrounded by mirrors, silk, and at least 6 sales assistants who kept bringing champagne and macarons. They're both beautiful, Sophia said, overwhelmed. Nonsense. One of them is perfect for you, and the other is just beautiful. Lydia examined the dresses critically. The first shows off your figure, but the second brings out your eyes. What do you think, James? James, who had been dragged along for this shopping expedition, looked up from his phone. Whatever makes Sophia happy. How romantic, Lydia said with obvious sarcasm. Darling, you need to be more specific. A woman remembers these details forever. Sophia watched as James put away his phone and really looked at the dresses. His expression became serious, almost professional. The second one, he said finally. The lace detail on the sleeves matches the shape of her collarbones, and the color brings out the gold flecks in her eyes. Sophia stared at him. Gold flecks? She had gold flecks in her eyes? Perfect. Lydia clapped. See, he does pay attention. Now, let's talk about shoes. For the next 2 hours, Sophia was measured, fitted, and styled. Lydia had opinions about everything from the height of heels. You need to be tall enough to look elegant next to James, but not so tall that you tower over him in photos. To jewelry. The Harlan family sapphires, obviously, but we need something borrowed that's personally meaningful. Speaking of meaningful, Lydia said while Sophia was trying on the 5th pair of shoes, tell me how you two met. Sophia felt her heart stop. They hadn't prepared for this question. It was, she began completely by accident. James interrupted smoothly. I was having the worst day of my life, sitting in that little cafe on 5th Street, and she walked in like sunlight cutting through storm clouds. Sophia looked at him, surprised by the poetry in his words. He looked so sad, she found herself saying, following his lead. I couldn't just walk past, so I sat down and asked if he was okay, and she listened. James continued, his eyes fixed on Sophia. Really listened, not just waiting for her turn to speak, but she heard me. It was the first time in months someone had really heard me. How romantic. Lydia sighed. And when did you know it was love again? Sophia panicked, but James was ready. When she fell asleep in my car 3 weeks later, we'd been talking all night about everything. Books, dreams, fears, and she just trusted me enough to fall asleep. I looked at her and thought, I want to protect this person for the rest of my life. The boutique fell silent. Even the sales assistants had stopped what they were doing to listen. Sophia felt something strange happening in her chest. The way James told the story, it sounded so real, so vivid that she could almost remember it happening. And you, dear? Lydia asked. When did you know? Sophia looked at James, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. When he remembered, she said softly. 3 months after we met, he showed up at my apartment with Thai food and bubble tea. I had mentioned once, just once, that I was having a bad day and that Thai food was my comfort food. He remembered something I'd said in passing and cared enough to act on it. James's expression changed. Something flickered in his eyes that looked almost surprised. Oh my. Lydia was practically glowing. You two are perfect together. Robert is going to love this story. As they left the boutique, arms full of bags and with a dress being delivered next week, Sophia walked beside James in silence. Where did that come from? She finally asked. What? The story. The details. You sounded like you were remembering something real. James was quiet for a long moment. Maybe I was. What do you mean? Nothing. Forget I said anything. But Sophia couldn't forget. The way he described meeting her, the specific details about sunlight and storm clouds, the tenderness in his voice when he talked about protecting her. It felt too real to be made up on the spot. They returned to the Harlan mansion to find it in chaos. There were caterers everywhere, florists arranging massive bouquets, and what looked like a wedding planner with a clipboard barking orders at everyone. "What's all this?" Sophia asked. "The engagement party?" Lydia said casually. "Tomorrow night, just a small gathering." "Small?" Sophia looked around at the army of staff. "How many people?" "About 200. 200? Sophia felt faint. "Lydia." "I can't. I don't know how to act at a party with 200 people." "You'll be fine, dear. Just stick close to James and be yourself." "But what if they ask questions? What if someone knows I'm not really Hay?" James took her hand. "Look at me." Sophia looked up, and for a moment everything else faded away. His hands were warm, steady, and his eyes were completely focused on her. "You're not an imposter," he said quietly. "You're exactly where you're supposed to be. These people are going to love you because you're genuine, kind, and stronger than you realize." "How do you know that?" "Because I've been watching you. The way you worry about your grandmother. The way you're trying to do right by everyone, even when you're terrified. The way you look at my family, like you're trying to memorize them. You have a good heart, Sophia. That's not something you can fake." For the second time that day, Sophia felt something shift in her chest. The way James looked at her, spoke to her, it was like he really saw her. Not the desperate girl who had signed a contract, but her. "James," she started. "Miss Sophia," a voice interrupted them. "Phone call for you." It was Greta holding a cordless phone with a concerned expression. "It's the hospital," she said quietly. Sophia's heart stopped. She grabbed the phone with shaking hands. "Hello? Miss Bennett, this is Dr. Ramirez. Your grandmother is asking for you. She's conscious and stable, but she seems distressed about something. She keeps asking about a wedding." Sophia felt relief and panic at the same time. "I'll be right there." She hung up and turned to James. "I have to go to the hospital. My grandmother is awake, but she knows about the wedding somehow." "I'll drive you," James said immediately. "You don't have to, Sophia." His voice was firm. "I'm driving you." During the car ride, Sophia's mind raced. How had her grandmother found out about the wedding? What was she going to say when she met James? How was she going to explain any of this? "She's going to know," Sophia said suddenly. "Grandma June. She's going to take one look at us and know this isn't real." "Why do you say that?" "Because she raised me. She knows when I'm lying, when I'm scared, when I'm pretending. She's going to see right through this whole thing." James pulled into the hospital parking lot and turned to face her. "Then don't pretend." "What?" "Don't pretend. Be yourself. Be the granddaughter who loves her enough to marry a stranger to save her life. Be the woman who's brave enough to take a leap of faith for family. Be the person who's sitting here worried sick about what an elderly woman will think of her choices. And what about you? What if she asks about your feelings?" James was quiet for a moment, his hand still on the steering wheel. "I'll tell her the truth," which is he turned to look at her, and Sophia felt her breath catch. There was something in his expression, something raw and honest and a little bit scared, that I'm starting to think this might be the best decision I've ever made. Before Sophia could process what that meant, he was out of the car and opening her door, offering his hand to help her out. As they walked toward the hospital entrance, Sophia realized that somewhere between the bridal boutique and this moment, something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't just playing a role anymore. The line between fake and real was getting blurrier by the hour, and she wasn't sure if that terrified her or thrilled her. Maybe both. "June. June," Sophia whispered as they entered the hospital room. "How are you feeling?" Her grandmother looked tiny in the hospital bed, but her eyes were sharp and alert. June Bennett had always been small in stature, but enormous in presence. And even connected to machines and monitors, she commanded the room. "Much better now that I can see my granddaughter," June said in accented English, then switched to Mandarin. "But I want to know about this man you've married." Sophia felt James tense beside her. "Grandma, this is James Harlan. James, this is my grandmother, June Bennett." James stepped forward and, to Sophia's complete surprise, bowed slightly before extending his hand. "Mrs. Bennett, it's an honor to meet you. Sophia speaks of you constantly." June studied him for a long moment, her eyes moving from his face to his hands to his shoes and back to his face. "Sit," she commanded, pointing to the chair beside her bed. "Both of you." They sat, and June continued her examination of James. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" James asked gently. "Someone desperate enough to marry my granddaughter for money." June's voice was blunt. "Victoria told me about the arrangement." "Don't look so shocked, child," she said to Sophia. "I may be old, but I'm not stupid." Sophia felt her face burn with embarrassment and shame. "Grandma, I can explain." "No need to explain. You did what you had to do to save a foolish old woman's life." June reached out and took Sophia's hand. "But I want to understand why this man agreed to help." She turned her penetrating gaze back to James. "What do you get out of this arrangement, Mr. Harlan?" James was quiet for a moment, and Sophia held her breath. This was it. Her grandmother was going to see right through everything. "6 months ago," James said finally, "I made some choices that disappointed my family deeply. Choices that hurt people I care about. This marriage gives me a chance to prove that I can be the man they raised me to be, instead of the man I became." "What kind of choices?" "The kind that land you in places you never thought you'd be. Surrounded by people you never thought you'd associate with. Doing things you never thought you'd do." James's voice was steady, but Sophia could hear something underneath it. Pain, maybe, or regret. "I lost sight of who I was supposed to be." June nodded slowly. "And my granddaughter? What does she mean to this redemption of yours?" Sophia expected another carefully crafted answer, another piece of their fictional story. Instead, James turned to look at her, and the expression on his face made her heart skip. "She reminds me of who I want to be," he said quietly. "Every day, I watch her worry about everyone except herself. I watch her try to make everyone comfortable, even when she's terrified. I watch her choose kindness when she could choose selfishness. She makes me want to be worthy of that kind of goodness." The room fell silent except for the beeping of monitors. June studied both of their faces for what felt like an eternity. She said finally. "And how do you feel about him, Sophia?" Sophia opened her mouth to give the prepared answer, but the words that came out surprised her. "He's not what I expected either. He makes me feel safe and seen, like I matter beyond what I can do for other people." "Show me your hands," June said suddenly to James. Confused, James extended his hands. June took them in her own smaller ones, turning them over, examining his palms and fingers. "Soft," she said. "But there are calluses here on the fingertips, recent ones. You've been working with your hands, but not manual labor." "What kind of work?" James looked uncomfortable. "I've been learning woodworking, building things." "What kind of things?" "Furniture, mostly. I built Sophia a bookshelf last week." Sophia stared at him. "You did what?" "It's being delivered to your apartment tomorrow," James said, looking almost embarrassed. "You mentioned that your books were stacked on the floor because you couldn't afford a good bookshelf. So you built me a bookshelf?" "Custom made," he said quietly, "with adjustable shelves for different book sizes and a special section for your art supplies." Sophia felt tears prick her eyes. She had mentioned the books once in passing during one of their getting-to-know-you conversations. And he'd not only remembered, but he'd done something about it. "Interesting," June said, still holding James's hands. "Most men who marry for convenience don't build furniture for their wives." "Most men don't have wives like Sophia," James replied. June released his hands and leaned back against her pillows. "One more question, both of you. What happens when this arrangement ends?" Sophia and James looked at each other. They'd never discussed this. The contract said 6 months, but what happened after that? They'd never planned beyond saving her grandmother and fulfilling whatever mysterious obligation James had to his family. "I don't know," Sophia admitted. "Neither do I," James said. "I guess we'll figure it out when we get there." June smiled for the first time since they'd arrived. "Good answer. If you'd had it all planned out, I'd have known you were lying." She looked at Sophia. "This one I like. Much better than that boy you dated in college." "Grandma, what?" "He had no ambition and terrible table manners. This one builds furniture and looks at you like you hung the moon." June waved her hand dismissively. "Now tell me about this engagement party I heard the nurses talking about." For the next hour, they sat with June as she peppered them with questions about the Harlan family, the party, the wedding plans. James answered everything with patience and detail, describing his family members with genuine affection and his Aunt Lydia's party planning with amused tolerance. "She sounds formidable," June said when James finished describing Lydia's 3-page seating chart for the dinner. "She is, but she has a good heart. She wants everyone to be happy, even if her methods are a bit intensive. And this party is tomorrow night." "Unfortunately, yes," Sophia said. "I'm terrified. 200 people, and I don't know anyone except the Harlan family." "Nonsense," June said firmly. "You know how to be gracious. You know how to listen. You know how to make people feel comfortable. These are the only skills you need at a party. But what if they ask about our relationship? What if someone sees through us?" "Then you tell them the truth," June said simply. "Which truth?" "That you care about each other, that you're learning to trust each other, that you're building something together, even if you're not sure what it is yet." June looked between them. "These things are true, aren't they?" Sophia looked at James, who was looking back at her with an expression she was starting to recognize. Something warm and steady, and a little bit vulnerable. "Yes," she said softly. "They're true." When visiting hours ended, they walked back to the parking garage in comfortable silence. The evening air was crisp, and the city lights were beginning to twinkle around them. "Your grandmother is remarkable," James said as they reached the car. "She saw right through us." "Did she? Or did she see something we haven't seen yet?" Sophia stopped walking. "What do you mean?" James turned to face her, leaning against the car. "Sophia, when I told her that you remind me of who I want to be, that wasn't part of our fake story. That was true. The bookshelf is real, too. Very real. Took me 3 weeks to build, because I kept having to redo the measurements. I'm not as good at woodworking as I pretended to be." Sophia felt something loosen in her chest, something she hadn't realized she'd been holding tight. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it felt too real. This whole thing is supposed to be temporary, convenient, fake, but somewhere along the way, it started feeling like something else." "What kind of something else?" "I don't know yet. That's what scares me." They stood there in the parking garage, city lights reflecting off car windshields around them, and Sophia felt the last of her defenses crumble. She was supposed to be protecting herself, supposed to remember that this was all an arrangement, supposed to keep her heart safely locked away. But when James looked at her like that, like she was something precious and unexpected, it was impossible to remember why she needed protection in the first place. "James." "Yeah. Tomorrow night at the party. I don't want to pretend anymore." "What do you want to do instead?" "I want to see what happens if we just are ourselves together." James smiled, the kind of smile that transformed his entire face. "I'd like that too." As they drove back to the Harlan mansion, Sophia realized that her grandmother had been right about one thing. James did look at her like she hung the moon. And somewhere over the past few days, she'd started looking at him the same way. Tomorrow night's party wasn't going to be a performance after all. It was going to be their first real date. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. "Breathe, Sophia. Just breathe." Sophia stood in front of the full-length mirror in the Harlan Mansion's master suite, wearing a midnight blue dress that Lydia had insisted was perfect for bringing out her eyes. Her hands were shaking as she tried to fasten a delicate diamond necklace that had belonged to James's grandmother. "I can't do this," she whispered to her reflection. 200 people, James. 200 people who are going to be watching every move we make, analyzing every word, looking for any sign that we don't belong together. Hey." James appeared behind her in the mirror, looking devastatingly handsome in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. "Look at me." She turned around and he gently took the necklace from her trembling fingers. "May I?" Sophia nodded, lifting her hair so he could fasten the clasp. His fingers brushed against the nape of her neck, sending shivers down her spine. "You look incredible," he said softly, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders. "But more importantly, you look like yourself. That's all anyone could want. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I use the wrong fork? What if someone asks about our honeymoon plans or our future children? Or Sophia?" James turned her to face him fully. "Do you trust me?" "Yes," she said without hesitation, and realized she meant it completely. "Then trust this. We're going to be fine. Better than fine. We're going to be amazing." He smiled, and she felt some of her anxiety ease. "Besides, I have it on good authority that you're charming, intelligent, and have excellent instincts about people." Whose authority? Mine. He offered her his arm. Ready to meet our public? The ballroom of the Harlan mansion had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over round tables, draped in ivory silk, each centerpiece a masterpiece of white roses and trailing ivy. A small orchestra played soft jazz in one corner, while waiters in formal wear moved gracefully through the crowd, carrying silver trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. My word, Sophia breathed as they stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking down at the glittering crowd below. Ladies and gentlemen, the orchestra conductor announced, may I present the guests of honor, Mr. James Harlan and his fiancée, Miss Sophia Bennet. A collective hush fell over the room as all eyes turned to them. Sophia felt her knees go weak, but James's arm was steady beneath her hand. Smile, he whispered. They're going to love you. They descended the staircase together, and Sophia was amazed to find that people actually did seem pleased to see them. She recognized some faces from photos James had shown her. Business associates, family, friends, distant relatives, but many were complete strangers who nonetheless smiled warmly and raised their glasses in salute. Lydia appeared at the bottom of the stairs, resplendent in emerald green silk. Darling, she embraced Sophia warmly. You look absolutely radiant. Come, there are so many people who want to meet you. The next hour passed in a blur of introductions. Sophia met James's great-aunt Clara, who was 93 and had scandalous stories about every family member dating back to the 1960 seconds. She chatted with his cousin Amelia, a pediatric surgeon who was fascinated by Sophia's work as a children's librarian. She listened politely to his business partner, Thomas, explain the intricacies of commercial real estate investment, and somehow managed to ask intelligent questions despite knowing absolutely nothing about the subject. You're a natural, James murmured during a brief moment when they were alone at their table. Look around. Everyone adores you. It was true. Everywhere Sophia looked, she saw friendly faces and genuine smiles. People seemed genuinely interested in her stories about working with children, her plans for expanding the library's literacy programs, her grandmother's recovery. No one treated her like an outsider or an interloper. They treated her like family. How is this possible? She whispered back. I'm nobody special. I'm just a librarian from Queens who can barely afford her rent. You're wrong about that, James said seriously. You're extraordinary. You just don't see it yet. Before she could ask what he meant, Lydia appeared at the microphone on the small stage where the orchestra had been playing. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. The room gradually quieted. As you all know, we're here tonight to celebrate a very special engagement. James has been the light of our family for 28 years, and we couldn't be more thrilled that he's found someone who makes him even brighter. Sophia felt her cheeks warm as gentle applause rippled through the room. But before we continue with the evening's festivities, I believe the happy couple has something they'd like to share with all of you. James. Sophia. Sophia's blood turned to ice. They hadn't prepared any kind of speech. They hadn't discussed sharing anything with the crowd. She looked at James in panic, but he was already standing, offering her his hand. Come on, he said gently. We've got this. Somehow, her legs carried her to the microphone. The crowd of faces below seemed enormous, expectant, waiting for some profound declaration of love or future plans. James took the microphone first. Thank you all for being here tonight. When I think about the journey that brought Sophia and me together, he paused, looking down at her with an expression that made her heart skip, I realize that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. He handed her the microphone and Sophia's mind went completely blank. 200 people stared at her expectantly. She could see Lydia beaming with pride, Robert nodding encouragingly, Lucas and Ethan raising their glasses in anticipation. She began, then stopped. What was she supposed to say? What did people expect to hear? Then she caught sight of Greta near the kitchen door, still wearing her apron over a party dress, tears in her eyes as she watched the woman who had become like a daughter to her in just a few days. She saw Clara in her wheelchair, ancient hands clasped, together in delight. She saw faces of people who had welcomed her without question, who had opened their family circle to include her simply because James had asked them to. 6 months ago, Sophia said, her voice gaining strength, I thought I knew what my life was going to look like. I had it all planned out. All controlled, all safe. And then I met James and suddenly nothing was the way I expected it to be. She looked at him standing beside her and felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. He's taught me that sometimes the scariest decisions lead to the most beautiful destinations. That family isn't just about blood. It's about choice. That love isn't just about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be the best version of yourself. The room was completely silent now, hanging on her every word. I can't promise that our future will be conventional or predictable, she continued, thinking about their 6-month contract and the mystery still surrounding James's past. But I can promise that it will be real and honest and full of the kind of joy that comes from choosing each other every single day. The applause that followed was thunderous. People weren't just clapping politely. They were cheering, whistling, some even wiping away tears. Lydia was openly sobbing with happiness, and Robert was nodding approval like she'd just delivered the speech of the century. As they made their way back to their table, person after person stopped them to offer congratulations and praise for Sophia's words. Beautiful speech, dear. You two are perfect together. When's the wedding? You're exactly what this family needed. That was incredible, James said when they finally had a moment alone. Where did that come from? I don't know, Sophia admitted. I looked out at all these people who have been so kind to me, and I wanted to tell them the truth. Which truth? That you have changed my life? That your family has changed my life? That I'm not the same person I was a week ago, and I don't want to go back to being her. James's expression grew serious. Sophia, I know what you're going to say. This is supposed to be temporary. We have a contract. We have an arrangement. But I can't pretend anymore that this feels like business to me. It doesn't feel like business to me either, he said quietly. It hasn't for days. Then what does it feel like? Before he could answer, the orchestra began playing again, and Lydia appeared beside their table. Time for the first dance, she announced. Everyone wants to see the happy couple on the dance floor. The crowd parted to create a circle around the polished wooden dance floor in the center of the ballroom. Sophia felt her anxiety spike again. She wasn't a particularly good dancer, and now she had to perform in front of 200 people. I don't really know how to dance, she whispered to James as he led her onto the floor. Just follow my lead, he said, placing one hand on her waist and taking her hand with the other. And look at me. Not at them, just me. The music began, something slow and romantic that Sophia didn't recognize, and James began to move. To her surprise, he was an excellent dancer, guiding her through the steps with such skill that she felt graceful, elegant, like she belonged in this world of formal parties and designer gowns. Where did you learn to dance like this? She asked, as he spun her gracefully before pulling her back into his arms. Mandatory lessons when I was younger. Lydia insisted that all Harlan men should be able to dance properly. He smiled. I hated it at the time, but I'm grateful now. As they moved together across the dance floor, Sophia became aware that the rest of the world had faded away. She could see the crowd watching them, smiling and swaying to the music, but they seemed distant, unimportant. All that mattered was the warmth of James's hand on her back, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room, the feeling that they fit together perfectly. Sophia, he said softly as the song drew to a close. Yes. When this is over, the party, the contract, all of it, I want you to know that meeting you has been the best thing that's happened to me in years. Even though we met under such strange circumstances, especially because of that. If we'd met at a coffee shop or through friends, I might never have had the courage to really get to know you. I might have assumed you were out of my league and never tried. Out of your league? Sophia laughed. James, you're a Harlan. You live in a mansion. You wear $1,000 suits. You're way out of my league. You're wrong, he said. Seriously. Money, houses, suits, none of that matters. What matters is character, kindness, courage. And you have more of all three than anyone I've ever met. The song ended, and the crowd erupted in applause once again. Other couples began joining them on the dance floor. But James and Sophia remained where they were, looking into each other's eyes, both breathing a little too quickly. There's something I need to tell you, James said urgently. About who I really am, about why I needed this marriage. About James, there you are. A voice interrupted them. They turned to see a tall, impeccably dressed man in his 50 seconds approaching, flanked by two younger men in expensive suits. I've been looking everywhere for you." James's expression immediately changed, becoming guarded, almost fearful. "Mr. Whitmore," he said carefully. "I didn't expect to see you here. Lydia invited me personally. Said it was time I met the woman who finally tamed the infamous James Harlan." The man's smile was cold, calculating. "Though I have to say, she's not what I expected for the heir to the Harlan fortune." Sophia felt the world tilt. Heir to the Harlan fortune? She looked at James, whose face had gone pale. "Surely you've told your lovely fiancé about your inheritance," Whitmore continued, his voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "About the trust fund that makes you one of the wealthiest young men in the country. About the business empire you're set to inherit when you turn 30? "That's not James," began. "Oh, but it is." Whitmore's smile grew wider. "Unless, of course, there's some reason you wouldn't want her to know. Some reason you'd prefer to keep playing the reformed ex-convict rather than revealing that you're actually one of the most eligible bachelors on the East Coast." The music had stopped. Conversations around them were dying out as people turned to listen. Sophia felt like she couldn't breathe. "Ex-convict," she whispered. "James, what is he talking about?" "It's complicated," James said desperately. "Let me explain." "Oh, you didn't know?" Whitmore looked delighted. "Your fiancé spent 3 years in minimum security prison for embezzlement. Though I suppose when you're worth $50 million, a little white-collar crime is just a youthful indiscretion." The ballroom was completely silent now. 200 pairs of eyes were fixed on them, watching the fairy tale crumble in real time. Sophia felt exposed, foolish, like everyone was seeing her for what she really was. A naive girl who had been played by a master manipulator. $50 million. She repeated numbly. "Give or take," Whitmore said casually. "Depending on market fluctuations, of course. The Harlan family trust is quite substantial." Sophia looked at James, who was staring at her with desperate eyes, clearly trying to communicate something without words. But all she could think about was every conversation they'd had, every moment of connection she'd thought was real. Every time he'd made her feel special and chosen and worthy of love. He was a multimillionaire, an heir to a business empire, someone who could have married anyone, had anyone, chosen anyone, and he'd chosen her not because he cared about her, but because she was convenient, desperate, grateful enough to sign a contract without asking too many questions. "Sophia," James said quietly, "please, let me explain." But Sophia was already backing away from him, shaking her head. The beautiful dress Lydia had chosen suddenly felt like a costume, the diamond necklace like a collar. She was playing dress-up in a world where she didn't belong with a man who had been lying to her from the moment they met. "I need some air," she managed to say. And then she ran. She pushed through the crowd of shocked guests, ignoring Lydia's calls and Robert's concerned voice, and fled toward the mansion's French doors that led to the garden. Behind her, she could hear James calling her name, could hear the murmur of 200 voices beginning to buzz with scandal and speculation. But she didn't stop running until she was outside in the cool night air, surrounded by darkness and silence, and the crushing realization that everything, absolutely everything, had been a lie. Sophia found herself in the Harlan Mansion's rose garden, sitting on a stone bench beside a fountain that sparkled under the moonlight. Her beautiful dress was spread around her like a midnight blue pool, but she barely noticed the cold seeping through the thin fabric. Her mind was reeling, trying to process everything that had happened in the last 10 minutes. $50 million. Ex-convict. Heir to a business empire. Everything, every conversation, every moment of connection, every gentle touch and caring gesture had been built on lies. She'd been such a fool believing that someone like James could genuinely care about someone like her. Of course, it had all been an act. Of course, he'd had ulterior motives. Of course, she'd been naive enough to fall for it. Sophia, she didn't turn around. She couldn't bear to look at him right now. Couldn't trust herself not to either scream at him or burst into tears. Maybe both. "Please." James's voice was closer now. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" She finally turned to face him, and was surprised by how wretched he looked. His perfect hair was disheveled, his bow tie undone, his usually composed expression completely shattered. "Explain how you've been lying to me since the moment we met." Explain how you let me worry about money and struggle with feeling worthy of your family when you're worth more than I'll make in 10 lifetimes. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Sophia stood up, anger finally overriding hurt. You're rich, James. Incredibly, impossibly rich. You didn't need my signature on a marriage contract to access some small inheritance. You didn't need to marry a desperate nobody to prove anything to your family. So, what was this really about? James ran his hands through his hair, pacing in front of the fountain. You're right. I lied to you. I've been lying to you from the beginning. And I hate myself for it. That's not an answer. The truth is, he stopped pacing and looked at her directly. I did go to prison 3 years for embezzlement, but it wasn't what you think. What I think is that you're a criminal who manipulated me into a fake marriage for reasons I still don't understand. I took the fall for someone else. Sophia blinked. What? My younger brother Lucas. You met him? He's the family lawyer now. He made some incredibly stupid financial decisions when he was 22, gambling debts, bad investments, and when he couldn't pay them back, he started borrowing from client accounts at the law firm where he was working. James sat heavily on the bench beside where she'd been sitting, staring at his hands. When it all came to light, Lucas was facing serious prison time. Real prison, not the minimum security place where I ended up. He would have been destroyed. He was barely out of college, scared, desperate, and he has a heart condition that would have made prison dangerous for him. So, you confessed to crimes you didn't commit. I was older, more stable, better able to handle the consequences. And James's voice broke slightly. He's the good one, you know, the one who actually deserved to inherit the family legacy. He's brilliant, ethical, caring. He made one terrible mistake, and I couldn't let it ruin his entire life. Sophia sank back down onto the bench, her anger deflating into confusion. But why didn't you just pay the money back if your family is so wealthy? Because my father didn't know. Still doesn't know. If Robert found out that Lucas had embezzled money, it would have killed him. Not financially, emotionally. He's so proud of Lucas, so sure that he raised sons with integrity and honor. Finding out that one of us was a thief would have broken his heart. So you let him think you were the thief instead. Better me than Lucas. I was already the disappointment. The son who couldn't settle down, couldn't find direction, couldn't seem to live up to the Harlan name. At least this way Lucas could still be the golden child. Sophia stared at him, trying to reconcile this story with everything she'd thought she knew. And the marriage? Where do I fit into this? James was quiet for a long moment. When I got out of prison 6 months ago, my father made it clear that I needed to prove I'd changed, that I needed to demonstrate stability, maturity, responsibility. He set conditions for me to access my trust fund, marriage being one of them. So, you found the most desperate, grateful woman you could and made her an offer she couldn't refuse? No. James's voice was fierce. That's not how it happened. Then, how did it happen? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you identified someone vulnerable enough to agree to your terms and naive enough not to ask too many questions. I was supposed to marry Beatrice Whitmore. Sophia's blood chilled. Whitmore, as in the man who just humiliated us in front of 200 people? His daughter. It was all arranged. A merger of two wealthy families. A way for me to prove I could make responsible decisions while helping the Harlan business interests. Beatrice and I have known each other since childhood. Our families have been friends for decades, and she was perfectly willing to enter into a marriage of convenience. So, what changed? James turned to look at her, and the expression in his eyes made her heart skip. I met you, Sophia. 3 weeks before I was supposed to propose to Beatrice, I was having lunch at that cafe on 5th Street. I'd been going there every day for months because it was the only place where no one knew who I was, where I could just sit and think without being the Harlan heir, or the ex-convict, or anyone's disappointment. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, lost in the memory. And then you walked in. You were arguing with someone on the phone, your landlord. I think about rent money. You were trying to keep your voice down, but you were clearly stressed, clearly struggling, and when you hung up, you sat there for a minute, looking so defeated. You were watching me. I couldn't help it. There was something about you that just drew me in. You looked like you were carrying the weight of the world, but you were doing it with such grace. And then your phone rang again. It was the hospital calling about your grandmother, and I watched you transform. James's voice grew softer. All that stress, all that worry about money and rent, it all disappeared the moment you heard your grandmother was in trouble. You didn't think twice about dropping everything to go to her. You didn't complain about the cost or the inconvenience. You just loved her completely, selflessly, without reservation. I still don't understand how that led to our marriage. I followed you to the hospital. Sophia stared at him. You what? I know how it sounds, but I couldn't stop thinking about you. I sat in the hospital waiting room for hours, watching you pace and cry and try to comfort your grandmother. I saw you arguing with doctors about payment plans. Saw you calling everyone you knew trying to borrow money. Saw you selling your jewelry to a pawnshop broker in the hospital lobby. You saw all that and I fell in love with you. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge neither of them knew how to cross. That's impossible, Sophia whispered. You didn't even know me. I knew everything I needed to know. I knew you'd sacrifice anything for the people you love. I knew you had more strength in your little finger than I had in my entire body. I knew you were exactly the kind of person I wanted to become. So, you manufactured a crisis to insert yourself into my life. I asked Victoria to approach you with the marriage proposal. Sophia felt like she'd been slapped. You asked Victoria? How do you even know Victoria? She works for a catering company that's done events for our family. When I told her I needed to find someone to marry who wasn't part of my usual social circle, someone genuine and kind, she mentioned her stepdaughter was in a desperate situation. Oh my. Sophia put her head in her hands. So Victoria didn't randomly tell you through some Harlan family connection. You specifically sought her out because you'd been stalking me at the hospital. I wasn't stalking you. I was inspired by you. Sophia, for 3 years in prison, I thought about what kind of man I wanted to be when I got out. I had all these ideas about honor and sacrifice and putting family first, but they were just ideas until I saw you living them. That doesn't make it better, James. That makes it worse. You manipulated a grieving, desperate woman into marrying you because you had some kind of romantic fantasy about who I was. It wasn't a fantasy. James moved closer to her on the bench. Everything I've learned about you since then has only confirmed what I saw that day. You are extraordinary, Sophia. You're everything I said you were and more. But you lied about everything else. The prison story. The family disappointment. Needing marriage. To access your inheritance. The prison story is true. Everything about Lucas is true. The disappointment is true. James's voice grew quiet. The only lie was about needing the marriage for financial reasons. I have access to my trust fund whether I'm married or not. My father suggested marriage as a way to prove stability, but it wasn't a requirement. Then why? Because I wanted to marry you. Because from the moment I saw you in that hospital, I knew I wanted to spend my life trying to be worthy of someone like you. Because I was a coward who couldn't figure out how to approach you. Honestly, Sophia stood up again, pacing away from him. Do you have any idea how this feels? I thought I was saving my grandmother's life by marrying someone who needed me as much as I needed him. I thought we were helping each other. I thought you thought what? I thought you were falling in love with me, too. She admitted quietly. I thought what was happening between us was real. It is real. How can it be real when it's built on lies? Because my feelings are real. Because the way you make me want to be a better man is real. Because when I'm with you, I forget about money and social status and family expectations. And I'm just me, the best version of me. But I'm not the best version of me. Sophia spun around to face him. I'm the version of me that was so desperate and scared that I agreed to marry a stranger. I'm the version that was grateful for any scrap of affection, any hint that someone like you could want someone like me. Someone like me? Rich, powerful, sophisticated, beautiful. Her voice broke. I've been walking around your family's mansion feeling like an imposter, trying so hard to be worthy of their acceptance. And the whole time you've been slumming it with the poor girl because she reminded you of some noble ideal. That's not, it is, James. You fell in love with an idea of me, not the real me. The real me is messy and insecure and completely out of her depth in your world. The real me checks her bank account 3 times before buying coffee and shops at thrift stores and has never owned anything that costs more than $50. And I love all of that about you. You love the novelty of it. You love how it makes you feel generous and protective and necessary. But what happens when the novelty wears off? What happens when you realize that I don't fit into your world? That I never will? That all the designer dresses and family acceptance in the world won't change the fact that we come from completely different universes. James stood up and walked over to her, stopping just close enough that she could see the pain in his eyes. What happens is that we build our own world together. How? I don't know yet, but I know I want to try. I know that the last week with you has been the happiest I've been in years. I know that when you smiled at me during our first dance tonight, I forgot that 200 people were watching us because all I could see was you, James. I know that when you gave that speech about choosing each other every day, I wanted to make that promise real. I wanted to stand up in front of everyone and say that yes, I choose you every day for the rest of my life. You can't choose me. You don't even know who I really am. Then tell me. Show me. Let me learn you, the real you, without contracts or arrangements or time limits. And what about your family? What about Beatrice Whitmore and family mergers and business expectations? I'll handle my family. As for Beatrice, James smiled slightly. She's actually relieved. She's been in love with someone else for months, but was too afraid to disappoint her father. My backing out of our arrangement gives her the freedom to follow her heart. So, everyone wins except me. What do you mean? I mean, I fell in love with someone who doesn't exist. I fell in love with James Harlan, reformed bad boy trying to prove himself to his family, not James Harlan, multi-millionaire heir, playing with people's lives because he's bored. I'm the same person. No, you're not. The man I fell in love with understood what it felt like to struggle, to worry about money, to feel like you had to prove your worth. The man I fell in love with built me a bookshelf because he understood what it felt like to not be able to afford the things you needed. I did build you a bookshelf. It's still being delivered tomorrow. Built by whom? You? In some workshop or commissioned from an expensive craftsman because it was a cute gesture. James was quiet for a long moment. I built it myself in Lucas's garage. It took me 3 weeks because I kept messing up the measurements and had to start over. Why? Because I wanted to make something for you with my own hands. Because I wanted to give you something that mattered, something that took effort and thought and care. But you could have bought me a library's worth of bookshelves without thinking twice about the cost. I could have, but that wouldn't have meant anything. Building it myself, learning a new skill, spending time thinking about what you needed and how to create it that meant something. Sophia felt tears welling up in her eyes. I don't know what's real anymore, James. I don't know what to believe. Believe this. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. This is real. What is it? Open it. With trembling fingers, Sophia opened the box. Inside was a ring, not the expensive diamond from their marriage contract, but something else entirely. It was a simple band made from what looked like reclaimed wood, with a small, perfectly imperfect stone set in the center. I made it, James said quietly. The band is from wood left over from your bookshelf. The stone is a piece of sea glass I found on the beach where I used to go when I needed to think during the hardest parts of my prison sentence. It's beautiful, she whispered. It's not worth anything financially. Any jeweler would laugh at it. But it's real, Sophia. It's honest. It's made from pieces of my real life, not my bank account. Why are you showing me this? Because I want to ask you to marry me. Really marry me. Not because of contracts or arrangements or family pressure, but because I love you. The real you. The woman who argues with landlords about rent and sells jewelry to pay for her grandmother's medicine and makes an entire room full of strangers fall in love with her in one speech. James, I know I lied to you. I know I manipulated the situation to meet you. I know I have a lot to make up for, but I also know that what's between us is real. Even if how we got here wasn't entirely honest. How can you be sure? Because you could have said anything during that speech tonight. You could have given some generic polite remarks about being happy to join the family. Instead, you spoke from your heart about choice and growth and becoming the best version of yourself. That wasn't fake, Sophia. That was real. And when I ran away just now, was that real too? That was the most real thing of all. You ran because you were hurt, because you felt betrayed. Because what we have matters enough to you that the lies felt like betrayal. Sophia looked down at the ring again at this imperfect handmade symbol of what? Love, hope, a future she'd never dared to imagine. What happens now? She asked. That depends on you. I don't know how to trust you again. Then don't. Not yet. But give me a chance to earn it back. How? Let me show you who I really am. Let me introduce you to the real James Harlan. Not the heir or the ex-convict or the family disappointment, but the man who builds furniture and visits his grandmother every Sunday and has been volunteering at a literacy program for ex-offenders for the past 6 months. You volunteer at a literacy program every Tuesday and Thursday. It's where I got the idea to approach you. Actually, working with people who are trying to rebuild their lives after making mistakes made me think about second chances, about redemption, about the kind of person I wanted to become. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to see me as someone worthy of you before you saw me as someone trying to become worthy of you. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the fountain and the distant sounds of the party continuing inside the mansion. Sophia turned the wooden ring over in her hands, thinking about everything that had happened, everything she'd learned, everything she still didn't know. The engagement party, she said suddenly. I ran away in front of 200 people. Your family, your friends, business associates are probably wondering if you're okay and hoping I'm groveling appropriately. Aren't you worried about the scandal? About what people will think? The only person whose opinion matters to me is yours. What about your father, your family? They'll understand eventually. And if they don't, James shrugged, then I'll deal with that too. You'd risk your relationship with your family for me. Sophia, I spent 3 years in prison to protect my family's feelings. I think I can handle disappointing them if it means not losing you. You haven't lost me, she said quietly. Haven't I? She looked at him, really looked at him. His hair was still disheveled, his tuxedo wrinkled, his usually perfect composure completely shattered. He looked vulnerable, hopeful, terrified. He looked human. I'm angry, she said finally. I'm hurt. I feel manipulated and lied to, and completely out of my depth. I understand, but I also, she paused, trying to find the right words, I also can't imagine going back to my life before you. I can't imagine not seeing your face every morning, or not having your family treat me like I belong somewhere. I can't imagine not building something together, even if I don't know what that something is yet. So, what does that mean? It means I need time, real time, not contract time. Time to figure out who you really are and who I really am, and whether those two people can actually work together. How much time? I don't know. Months maybe. Maybe longer. And until then? Until then, we start over. No contracts, no arrangements, no family pressure, just dating, getting to know each other honestly. I'd like that, James said softly. With some conditions, anything. No more lies ever. Even little ones. Even ones you think are protecting me. Agreed. No more making decisions for me. If you want to do something nice, ask me first. If you want to help with something, talk to me about it. Agreed. And no more hiding behind what you think I want to hear. I want to know about your money, your family expectations, your real life, all of it. Even the ugly parts. Especially the ugly parts. James smiled, and for the first time since this whole conversation started, it reached his eyes. In that case, there's something else I should tell you. What now? I hate opera. I'm terrible at small talk. I have no idea how to use most of the appliances in my kitchen, and I once got lost in my own house for 45 minutes. Despite everything, Sophia found herself laughing. Seriously. Seriously. Lydia had some walls moved around while I was in prison, and when I came back, I couldn't find the library for the better part of an hour. That's actually kind of endearing. Is it? It makes you seem more human. Less like some perfect prince who has everything figured out. I definitely don't have everything figured out, especially when it comes to you. Good. I don't have anything figured out either. Maybe we can figure it out together. I'd like that very much. They sat together on the bench, not quite touching, but not quite apart, while the party continued inside and the stars wheeled overhead. After a while, Sophia slipped the wooden ring onto her finger, not her ring finger, but her right hand as a promise to try rather than a promise to marry. We should go back inside, she said eventually. People are probably worried. Are you ready to face them? Are you with me? I'm ready for anything. As they walked back toward the mansion, Sophia caught sight of their reflection in the French doors. They looked like they'd been through a storm. Disheveled, emotional, slightly worse for wear. But they also looked like they belonged together. like two people who had found each other despite impossible odds, and were determined to make it work. James. Yeah. When this is all over, the explanations, the family discussions, the figuring out what comes next, I want to see that bookshelf. It's not very good. The corners are a little uneven, and I couldn't get the stain quite right. I don't care. I want to see what you built for me. Okay. And I want to visit your literacy program. I want to meet the people you work with and understand what that means to you. I'd love that. And I want to learn about your family's business and your trust fund and what being a Harlan heir actually means in practical terms. It's incredibly boring. I don't care about that either. As they reached the French doors, James stopped and turned to face her. Sophia, yes. Thank you for what? For running away, for making me chase you, for demanding the truth, for giving me a chance to earn you properly instead of just trying to win you with circumstances. Thank you for chasing me, and for building me a bookshelf, and for being brave enough to tell me the truth even when it was hard. So, what do we tell them in there? The truth that we're starting over, that we're going to take our time and do this right, and the engagement on hold until we're sure we're engaging for the right reasons. I can live with that. Good, because I plan to make you work for it. I'm looking forward to it. As they opened the doors and stepped back into the warm light and gentle chaos of the party, Sophia realized that for the first time since this whole adventure began, she wasn't afraid of what came next. She didn't know what their future would look like, but she knew it would be built on honesty, choice, and the kind of love that was strong enough to survive both lies and truth. The moment they entered the ballroom, Lydia appeared as if she'd been waiting by the doors. Her mascara was slightly smudged, and she looked more concerned than Sophia had ever seen her. "Oh, darling!" Lydia immediately enveloped Sophia in a fierce hug. "Are you all right?" When that horrible Whitmore man said those things, Robert wanted to throw him out immediately, but we weren't sure if you'd want us to make a bigger scene. "I'm okay," Sophia said, surprised by how much she meant it. "We're okay." Lydia stepped back and studied both of their faces carefully. "You've been crying?" she said to Sophia, then turned to James. "And you look like you've been through an emotional meat grinder." "Aunt Lydia," James began, but she held up a hand. "Before you say anything, I want you to know that half the guests have already left, which is probably for the best, and the other half are in the library demanding to know if they should be calling lawyers or planning a wedding." "What did you tell them?" Sophia asked. "That young love is complicated, and they should mind their own business." Lydia's expression softened. "But I would like to know what we're dealing with here. Are you two together or aren't you?" Sophia looked at James, then back at Lydia. "We're figuring it out." Which means, James said, taking Sophia's hand, that we're starting over. "No more contracts. No more arrangements. We're going to date. Actually date. Get to know each other without any pressure or timelines." Lydia's face broke into a slow smile. "Well, that's the most sensible thing either of you has said since this whole business started. You're not disappointed?" Sophia asked about the engagement being postponed. "Disappointed? Darling, I'm thrilled." Lydia clapped her hands together. "Do you have any idea how rare it is to see two people actually fight for their relationship instead of just accepting whatever's convenient? Most couples your age would have either stormed off in opposite directions or pretended nothing happened." Robert appeared beside them, still elegant despite the evening's drama. "The remaining guests are asking if there's going to be an announcement," he said quietly. "There is," James said firmly. He walked over to the small stage where the microphone still stood and tapped it gently. The remaining crowd, maybe 50 people now, turned their attention to him. "Ladies and gentlemen, I owe you an apology for the disruption this evening." His voice was clear, confident. "And I owe you an explanation." The room fell completely silent. "Some of you have known me since I was a child. You've watched me make mistakes, poor choices, and you've seen me try to learn from those mistakes. Tonight, you witnessed the consequence of one of those poor choices. The choice to begin an important relationship with dishonesty." Sophia watched from the side of the room, amazed by his composure. "Sophia Bennett is the most remarkable woman I've ever met. She deserves honesty, respect, and the kind of love that's built on truth rather than convenience. I failed to give her those things from the beginning, and tonight she called me out on that failure." He looked directly at her as he continued. "So, we're starting over. No contracts, no arrangements, No family expectations or business considerations. Just two people who care about each other enough to do this right. He smiled. Which means you'll probably be invited to another party in a few months when we get engaged for real. The remaining guests erupted in applause and laughter. Someone called out, "About time." And another voice added, "We like her better than Beatrice anyway." As James left the stage, Lucas and Ethan approached them with grins. "Well, that was dramatic," Lucas said, punching James lightly on the shoulder. "But I have to say, your honesty speech was pretty impressive." "Beatrice is going to be relieved," Ethan added. "She's been texting her boyfriend all night." "Her boyfriend?" Sophia asked. "Henry Lawson. They've been secretly dating for 8 months, Lucas explained. She was terrified to tell her father because he had his heart set on merging with the Harlan family business. "What will happen now?" Sophia asked James. "Nothing dramatic. The Whitmores and Harlan will remain friends and business partners. Beatrice will be free to marry whoever makes her happy, and I will too. And the family business expectations." Robert stepped forward. "My dear, the only expectation I have for my sons is that they be good men who contribute something positive to the world. James has been doing that long before tonight. Even with the prison sentence, especially because of the prison sentence," Robert said firmly. "Taking responsibility for someone else's mistakes, protecting family at personal cost, those are Harlan values. I've never been prouder of him." Sophia felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. Greta appeared with a plate of food. "You two haven't eaten anything all night," she scolded. "Sit down, eat something, and stop being so dramatic." They found themselves at a small table in the corner with Lydia, Robert, Lucas, and Ethan. The conversation flowed easily. Stories about childhood Harlan family disasters. Questions about Sophia's work at the library, gentle teasing about James's woodworking skills. "He really did build that bookshelf himself," Lucas confirmed. "I have pictures of him covered in sawdust, cursing at the instruction manual." "There was an instruction manual?" Sophia asked. "Sort of. I may have printed out some plans from the internet and then completely ignored them," James admitted. "Which is why it took 3 weeks instead of 3 days," Ethan added with a grin. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, the Harlan family gathered in the library for what Lydia called a proper family meeting. "Now that the drama is over," Lydia said, settling into her favorite armchair, "we need to discuss practical matters such as Sophia asked." "Where you're going to live during this getting-to-know-each-other period," Robert said. "The mansion is lovely, but probably not the best environment for developing a normal relationship." "I was thinking about that," James said. "There's a small apartment above the garage that we used for guests before we renovated the main house. It has its own entrance, kitchen, everything you'd need. You could live there separately from me while we figure things out." "And where would you live?" "I was thinking about getting my own place, something smaller, more normal. I've been looking at apartments in Queens, actually near your grandmother's neighborhood." Sophia stared at him. "You want to move to Queens?" "I want to live in the real world. I've spent too many years insulated by money and family connections. If we're going to build something real together, I need to understand what real life actually looks like. But your family, your business responsibilities can all be handled from Queens just as easily as from Manhattan," Robert interjected. "In fact, it might be good for him to have some distance from the family business while he figures out his own path." "What about your volunteer work?" Sophia asked. "The literacy program meets in Brooklyn. Queens would actually be more convenient." Lydia leaned forward. "And what about you, dear? What do you need to feel comfortable during this transition?" Sophia thought about it. "Time with my grandmother. She's being released from the hospital next week, and she'll need help during her recovery." "Of course," James said immediately, "whatever she needs. And I want to keep working. I love my job at the library, and I don't want to lose my independence." "Absolutely. And I want to meet your friends, your real friends, not just family and business associates." James looked slightly embarrassed. "I don't actually have many real friends. Prison and family scandal aren't great for maintaining a social circle. Then we'll make new friends together." "I'd like that." Lydia clapped her hands together. "This is wonderful. A proper courtship, the way things should be done." "Aunt Lydia," James warned. "No interfering. I wouldn't dream of it." Lydia's innocent expression fooled no one, though I might occasionally ask how things are going. And by occasionally, she means daily, Lucas added with a grin. Weekly at most, Lydia protested. As the family dispersed and began cleaning up the remnants of the party, Sophia found herself alone with James in the conservatory, surrounded by Lydia's prize orchids. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "Moving to Queens. Starting over. Taking time to date properly. It's not exactly the life you're used to. It's exactly the life I want," he said firmly. "Sophia, I've had money and privilege my entire life, and I've never been as happy as I've been this past week with you. Even with all the drama and complications, especially with the drama and complications, they're proof that this matters, that we're both willing to fight for it. And your family, are you sure they're really okay with all this uncertainty? They love you. They've loved you since the first night you walked into this house and treated Greta like family and listened to Uncle Lucas's boring law stories like they were fascinating. They're not boring. They absolutely are. But you made him feel heard and appreciated anyway. That's who you are, Sophia. That's why everyone who meets you falls a little bit in love with you. Not everyone. Everyone who matters." They stood quietly among the orchids, and Sophia realized that despite everything that had happened, the lies, the revelations, the public humiliation, she felt peaceful, hopeful even. "When do we start?" she asked. "Start what? This proper courtship, this getting to know each other honestly. How about tomorrow? I'll pick you up at your apartment, your real apartment, and we'll go see your grandmother together. Then maybe dinner somewhere normal where I can't use my last name to get a table. You might have to wait for a table like a regular person. I'm looking forward to it. And after that, we take it one day at a time. One conversation, one date, one honest moment at a time. No more lies. No more lies. No more manipulation or arranged circumstances. Just me asking if you'd like to have dinner and you saying yes or no based on whether you actually want to spend time with me. That sounds terrifying. Why? Because you might decide you don't actually like the real me. Or I might decide I don't actually like the real you. That's possible," James admitted. "But I think it's more likely that we'll discover we like each other even more than we thought." "How can you be so confident?" "Because the real you argued with me in a hospital parking lot about whether I was being too presumptuous. The real you told my entire family exactly what you thought about love and choice and becoming better people. The real you ran away from a party because your feelings were hurt, which means your feelings were real enough to hurt. And the real you, the real me, spent 3 years in prison reading books about furniture making so I could build something beautiful for someone I'd never even spoken to. The real me has been volunteering with ex-offenders because I believe people can change and grow. The real me fell in love with a woman who was selling her jewelry to save her grandmother and knew immediately that I wanted to spend my life trying to deserve someone that selfless." Sophia felt her heart skip again, the way it had when he'd first mentioned the blue of her eyes. The way it had during their dance, the way it did every time he looked at her like she was something precious. "Okay," she said softly. Okay, let's try this. The real, honest, no contracts version. Are you sure?" "No, but I'm sure I want to find out what happens if we do." James smiled, and this time it was the smile she'd fallen in love with. Genuine, warm, a little bit nervous, completely real. "In that case, Sophia Bennett, would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow night?" "Yes, James Harlan, I would very much like to have dinner with you tomorrow night." And that felt like the beginning of something real.